From 2010 to 2020, Labour won 0 general elections. They also held no office, had no prime ministers, and were able to implement none of their manifesto commitments. And this isn't because the Conservative government were doing spectacularly well either. There was significant backlash to the austerity policies implemented by David Cameron, and chaos and confusion under Theresa May about the direction of Brexit. In this period, Labour also had 3 different leaders, each representing a different vision for the country and a different interpretation of socialism. So why did the country reject all 3? What does this mean for Labour? And can they expect to ever get back into number 10 Downing Street? In order to conduct this autopsy on Labour's electoral chances between 2010 and 2020, we're going to split this video into 2 sections. Firstly, we're going to take a look at each general election, 2010, 2015, 2017, and 2019, and try and decipher why Labour lost them. Then, in a second section, we're going to take a look at any overarching trends and try and figure out what Labour can actually do to ensure that they're able to actually gain power in this next decade. Let's start with 2010 then. Back then, we had Prime Minister Gordon Brown go head-to-head with David Cameron. New Labour had been in power for 13 years and had endured their fair share of scandals. The most relevant for 2010, though, was the 2008 financial crisis. Although not Labour's fault, being in office at the time of the crash meant that they were guilty by association. And that left them, despite years of hard work, trying to prove that they could be trusted with the economy, back at square one. Brown had also been criticised for not calling a general election earlier when Labour were ahead in the polls. And additionally, in the run-up to the election, Brown referred to a woman on the campaign trail as bigoted in a hot mic mishap, something that garnered him a lot of negative media attention. All of this combined made Brown look like the figurehead of a government swiftly growing tired under the burden of leadership. This was made all the worse for Labour by the fact that both the Conservatives and Lib Dems had young, energetic leaders in David Cameron and Nick Clegg, respectively. They appeared eager for office and had reformed their parties in a similar way that Blair and Brown had in the lead-up to their landslide 1997 election victory. In essence, Brown had lost steam because, well, the new Labour project was also kind of out of steam. Fast forward to 2015, and we see that Labour is now headed by Ed Miliband. The party opposes a government that's presiding over austerity, with huge cuts being made across the board. For his part, Miliband was trying to make Labour look as though they could be trusted with the economy once again, and as such, he pledged that he would cut spending if elected Prime Minister. However, this didn't really work out as planned, as in a report about why Labour lost in 2015, Labour grandee Margaret Beckett cited the economy as one of the main reasons that Miliband didn't move into number 10 Downing Street in 2015. Alongside the economy, Beckett also cited immigration and benefits, the fear that Labour could go into coalition with the SNP, and the idea that Miliband himself wasn't a strong leader. Remember, this wasn't all too long after the infamous bacon sandwich incident. But this fear of the SNP was somewhat understandable. The Conservatives ran attack ads depicting Miliband in the pocket of Alex Salmond, consolidating the assumption that if there was a hung parliament in 2015, which was widely believed at the time, then Labour would enter into a parliamentary agreement with the SNP in order to secure government. And as many in England were turned off by the SNP and their ideas of Scottish independence, this prospect didn't help Miliband all too much. As it turned out, though, there was no hung parliament, and the Tories were back into Downing Street. It was at this point that Miliband resigned and Corbyn took over. And it looked like Corbyn was going to have a while to warm up into the role, because it was believed that the next general election would take place in 2020. But following the chaos of the Brexit vote, Theresa May opted for a snap election in 2017. This election backfired and reduced her majority, with her having to enter into a supply and confidence agreement with the DUP in Northern Ireland in order to get enough votes. So, while some viewed Corbyn as winning this election, as he increased his majority, this still wasn't enough to make him Prime Minister. Ultimately, the electorate still didn't trust Labour in the driving seat. However, given how close Labour were to winning in 2017, they increased their vote and seat share significantly, remember. It's hard to decipher why they didn't win. Perhaps some viewed Corbyn's manifesto as too left-wing, or perhaps they were comfortably on their way to convincing the electorate of their vision for the country, but they just didn't have enough time before 2017. Nonetheless, Labour didn't have to wait all that long for their next opportunity to prove that they had the support of the electorate, with the next election being held in 2019, an election that Labour lost resoundingly in their worst electoral defeat since 1935. Now, there are a number of reasons for this. Firstly, Corbyn had been accused of failing to deal with the anti-Semitism within his party. Secondly, the manifesto added a lot of things to it, which made it easy for the media to portray Labour as a fantasist party that wanted to just give everything to everyone. And this lack of focus ultimately really didn't help. Thirdly, and arguably most important though, Labour's Brexit strategy was confused. Boris Johnson was running on the simple premise of get Brexit done, whereas Labour proposed further referendums and negotiations. And ultimately, it seems that people did just want to get Brexit done. So that's a summary of the last 4 elections. Let's move on to the next part of this video. The overarching reasons why Labour failed to gain power in this decade. And there are broadly 3 conclusions we can draw here. The first is an issue of perception, especially of their leaders. Brown was seen as a representative of a worn-out new Labour project, and the electorate wanted something fresh. While Miliband wasn't seen as being as prime ministerial as Cameron, neither was Corbyn, by the way, who at many times struggled to even control his own party, for example on issues like anti-Semitism. The second conclusion we can draw is that Labour still struggle to shake the perception that they can't be trusted with the economy. To be fair to Labour, they've tried a number of strategies to get rid of this label, but nothing seems to have really worked. They tried in 2015 to agree to cuts. They tried in 2017 and 19 promising to increase spending. But whichever strategy they go down, the Conservatives are just ruthless with this attack line. And it may just be the case that it will take a long time to fully shake that label. And finally, it appears that Labour also struggled to offer a manifesto that resonated enough with the electorate. 2017 might have been the closest they got, but in other elections, such as 2019, it contained just too much. Conversely, in 2015, it could be argued that Labour's agreement to cuts left them not distinct enough from the Tories. The point is that there's probably some kind of sweet spot in the middle of these two, a sweet spot that Labour has struggled to find. Ultimately though, things appear to be looking up for Labour. Starmer has been viewed favourably as a leader, and has already introduced policies that have gone down well with the electorate. For example, Great British Energy. This has helped him gain a huge lead in the polls, a lead that he is sustaining. So perhaps Labour have learnt some lessons from the past. Perhaps the Conservatives are just doing badly at the moment. But regardless, it looks like their time in the wilderness could be coming to an end. Speaking of coming to an end, that's the final TLDR UK video of the year. I really hope you enjoyed our videos this year. I hope you've subscribed, and I hope that you're ready for more in 2023. Because in British politics, who knows what's going to happen next?